Gas masks and hand grenades. Gas masks and hand grenades. Gas masks and hand grenades. Gas masks and hand grenades.
Hey, what is happening, YouTube land? How's it going? I'm back, kind of, sort of. We were back. I haven't gone away, but I'm not my usual omnipresent pain in the ass self. I decided to give a lot of my panel guests some wide berth and let them kind of recuperate and get away from me for a while. And I had a lot of health stuff going on. A lot of testing, a lot of unanswered questions that still remain unanswered to a degree, but a lot of upheaval in sort of some of the things that were going on. And I was buying a lot of guitars. I don't know. I was spending a metric fuck ton. I don't know if that's an actual standard for international measurement or anything like that, but a metric fuck ton of money. That's what I was doing. So I've gotten a lot of new stuff in here. We're going to go over that in a future episode of Collector Scum here. But hey, I got this guy with me right here. This dude. I do that always now so that I'm covered. Mr. Kellen, how are you, sir?
I'm doing really well. We finally got a chance to put this together. I know also, I went away for a while back to Oregon. So there was a delay in getting this episode up and running, but happy to make it happen.
No, this is great, man. And like these, I've had these in the house for about a month or so, but I went out and pulled in all the first 5, the ones that I feel are the real necessary ones. I think I don't know whether I'll go beyond this. It's one of those things where if I happen to see them used somewhere or for a good price, maybe, but I don't think I'll go beyond these because I think the best of the material is in these 5 albums. And we're going to talk about 2 of those albums that we call this. Look, I'm going to get this out of the way right now. We call this the Definitive Albums Deconstructed series. That was just a neat little acronym that, one day brainstorming I came up with. The problem with it is that in many bands' catalogs, you can oftentimes say, well, it's certainly a matter of taste, 1. And 2, you could ask 100 different people, what's the definitive album from WASP? And you might get, 20% may say the first album, 20% may say Crimson Idol. Somebody might say fucking, what's some of the later ones? I don't even know. Hell, do you know any of the later ones?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's gonna say the definitive records past
El Dorado or something. Yeah, El Dorado is probably not gonna be one of their picks. But it's kind of like when I dreamed this up, Rick kept throwing this at me. Well, what's your criteria for the definitive? And I'm like, dude, I don't know. Let's just go with the album we like the best. And the one that if we had to go up to somebody and say, hey, here's this band you never heard of, and you're not really allowed to maybe necessarily say they sound like X, Y, or Z, right? How would you describe the band, and how would you describe that album that you're recommending they start with? And so I guess that was probably more where we're at with definitive definition, right? Or the definition of definitive. It's kind of what you feel is the best estimation of what the band's maybe the best piece of work they did. And so you chose which album did you choose? Why don't you show?
So we got a little show and tell going here.
Nice.
So this is all of these are original pressings.
Nice.
So the debut
look at that.
by WASP, self-titled there. I mean, all there 1984. It looks like this, you've got some tubes here connected. The whole stage presence, the outfits here are spectacular.
It was so over the top, right?
Yeah. but this record, we can show off the sleeve, but we're gonna jump into probably a couple different conversations that extend beyond your sort of traditional dad outline,
Okay.
simply because
All good. Oh man, look at that.
this was not this was not included on the original release.
That's
We
right.
kind of go over this later on, but I also have this single here
Nice.
to show off because it's an important sort of
Yeah.
when discussing this record, and it's important. So
Very integral in the PMRC's lexicon of hate, right?
yeah,
Free, because we all know the GOP has always been about free speech, right?
I mean, we'll
We
get
don't get too political, but I get, but you get where I'm going with that, and that was 1984, right?
well, yeah. So the PMR, the release comes out in, so just to kind of get the timeline correct.
August. Oh yeah.
So the single comes out, is released in April of 84.
April of 84. The
and
album's
that's
in August.
right. And Capitol Records does not want it to be included on the initial
album.
full length. The
Right.
actual, then I think second single, I Want to Be Somebody, comes out later on in July.
Mm-hmm.
The record actually is released in August. The PMRC was established in 85.
85. So it was actually post dated, but it was one of the pivotal songs that kind of made them do that.
Yeah. So in looking at the Filthy 15,
Yeah.
it's actually the one song that is flagged for 3 different reasons.
No way. Is it really?
Yeah. Yes. It's the one. I mean, there's a lot of different songs on there that are probably deserving. But it is one of the best moments in all of the PMRC hearings. Is, I forget who said it, but this sort of the wives of these senators and congressmen are assembled, and she says,
Al Gore.
Yeah, Tipper Gore was probably the highest profile person, but I think it wasn't her, but someone else said Cole Porter's "The Birds and the Bees" can hardly be compared with Wasp's "I-F-U-C-K like a beast." It's one of the best.
Is that what
moments.
she said? She spelled it out.
Yeah, she couldn't say it right.
Right.
It's one of the best moments of the entire PMRC in terms of contrast and
the irony is, now that's 1984. This album came out a few months after I graduated high school. Okay, so which and the things were very different back then, man. I mean, there were words that we use regularly, just talking amongst ourselves as bros and stuff. We used the FAG word, just as a term of endearment in a lot of ways, or as a, no, would have been, I mean, you could have used it that way, but we don't use those words, or most of us try not to use those words anymore. You still do, but I mean, I hear it sometimes, but
well,
man,
I mean, I think
having that word on a song so out there in your face was like unbelievable, right?
Right. I mean, I want to get into this. I want you to introduce your record and kind of talk about things that you think are important. But to your point here, to go from "Hot for Teacher," to "Looks That Kill," to here we have "I Fuck Like a Beast," right? Like it was like everything.
And then the amazing thing is, flash forward to I want to say, was it 89 or 90 with 9 Inch the Downward Spiral, or was that 92? When was that?
I want to say that was later, but
early 90s.
Maybe the chat can look it up for us and let us know.
But then you get into like, I want to fuck you like an animal. So much had changed so quickly in that span of time, because you look back to, I mean, Kellen, you're reasonably younger than I am, and like I recall I Love Lucy, and then you can still find this stuff out there, but the stuff that was on TV, man, like saying the word bastard on TV was just, you only heard that very late at night on maybe a late movie that was running on cable. You just didn't hear that kind of language. So for Blackie to just come right out and go, yeah, fuck like a beast, man. I got pictures of naked ladies lying on the bed. I mean, it's just so graphically in your face. And it's like, for guys like me, it's like, yeah, this is awesome. You know, I love this. You know?
And I want to get your
Thank you.
Your perspective here when we talk about, like, I think in terms of the age that you are sort of living in, right, when this record comes out, and the impacts that it had, that's something we'll want to revisit later on.
It clearly didn't affect me much because I use the F word like it's like the. It's like a. It's like the.
Okay,
me, you know?
so I'm gonna relinquish the floor here and let you introduce the Headless Children, and then I'll bring that back.
We're gonna. I typically, you want to do your album last? Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, I just typically, if you wanted to talk about your record.
Oh here. Yeah, what I typically do is and basically, yeah, you're right. I should mention, I picked this album. I got to be honest with you, man. If I was not in a state, and I apologize to a lot of people if I'm a bit scatterbrained today. Kellen knows. I'll just dump this out there. I overdid it last night severely on spirits, let's just say. And I'm hurting today. So I spent most of my day horizontal. And being up right now, I'm feeling that, you know, like I'm not sick, but I'm just not here. And so had I had a little bit more time today, I was actually thinking about going with this, because some of my very best favorite songs are on this album, but I don't honestly think it's quite as strong as this as a whole. There's a couple of tracks on here that I'm kind of iffy about. I love every song on this album. There's no skippers for me on here. So, and frankly, this was the first album where, you know, we talked about it, where here are the other, well, you showed yours and there's mine. And then these are the reissues from Madfish, I think they're called, or something like that. They're fairly recent, 2008, 2009. So with WASP, you really can't go wrong with any of these first 5 albums. They really are a high caliber all throughout. But we always try to hone in on one. And for Kellen, it's the debut, and for me, it's this one. And I think this is the album where they kind of really, where Blackie came away with like a complete album that every song is, to me, some of his best work as a complete piece. And he got away from the horror, gore, sex stuff. There's not anything on unlike the first album, which we were just talking about. There's a lot of gore and horror, sort of, you know, and obviously let's be honest though, that cover, it's one of the worst covers ever. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's good, right? You know, I guess.
Perfect. I mean, like the whatever plastic skeleton
hanging
out in the background.
Skeleton. Yeah.
Because I used to have, right, like part of the stage show was to have women on a rack, right?
Tethered up. Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, all splattered with blood, and generally, if I recall correctly, they were topless. I do believe, generally at the shows, which would have, you know, imagine that as an 18, 19-year-old kid going in to see that show in LA or wherever they were doing it at. You know, they weren't doing it in Philadelphia, I don't think. But let's just say LA, and you see a topless chick up there with blood all over her boobs. You're like, yeah, give me more of that.
Even like I was looking at we grab the cover here for Animal.
Mm-hmm.
The blood, I don't know if you want to zoom in, or the blood here, I don't know what they used for like the coloring, but it just looks like, you know, watercolor.
It looks like syrup.
Yeah.
It looks like strawberry syrup or something, right? Definitely doesn't look like film industry grade vampire blood, right?
Sure. Yeah. They're I mean, I'm sure once they put all their time and effort into making this cod piece of reality.
Yes.
And then
they blew their budget right there. Yeah, they didn't have enough money for that.
Once they're like, okay, this is an achievement. I mean, you put the tiger stripes.
Yeah.
In addition to that, it's
absolutely, man. What's up, Tim? How you doing? Hey, everybody. Thanks for jumping in, everybody. Yeah. So, and let's be honest here. Wasp, not the best covers overall of their albums. I mean, probably the best one might be this one, which is sort of a kind of it has something to do with the Nazis, I believe, if I'm not incorrect about that.
Well, there's a bunch of different, and you can,
Like
when I was
historical
reading
figures.
about, yeah. So there's
Yeah,
all these different figures. Now, I
Yeah.
do think at one point in time, the Ayatollah was on the cover, and I think that had one time been censored, and
No
then
kidding.
I think there are members of the Klan who are also on it.
Well, there's Hitler right there, and
Yeah.
there's looks like Stalin. I think this is Jim Jones. And then you've got Jack Ruby. You've got Lee Harvey Oswald. So a lot of
Right.
historical figures, and there's something in there that I read on the Wikipedia page. When I pull it up on that album, I'll get into it. But yeah, they never were exactly Roger Dean artwork, or even the inventive stuff of, like, say, Rush, or like Farewell to Kings, or the cool Hugh Syme. They always kind of they were always just, it was either something weird like that, which is cool. I mean, it's not a bad looking cover, but it's not like striking. Or this one. This one's actually not so bad. It's kind of interesting. But then you got this, which is campy silly, and then you've got the Blackie Lawless show. It's the Blackie Lawless show. And if we had Chris Holmes on here, I'm sure he had a lot of good things to say about Blackie. But anyway, yeah, a lot of historical characters on there, right? Super Strike. So let's get into your album. Let's talk about your album. As far as, why don't you lay out your thoughts on the album, and more than that, what was the first time you heard Wasp? Do you remember?
So I don't remember the first time I heard Wasp, but what I am relatively certain is I think they were early, sort of, for me, grouped into the glam scene, and
Right.
but they were constantly referred to in a way that felt like, for all the negative stereotypes that the glam scene had, primarily because I came into metal listening to more extreme stuff.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So for fans of bands that were in this genre, Wasp was always referred to as some sort of exception to the rule.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting about them is, I still think, especially on this record, and I think Last Command, you could probably say this as well, there's a certain kind of glam sound that's going on here in this record. But in some way, to call them a glam band, that would give you historical context. Like, it gives you a time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
early to mid 80s, and a place, primarily Los Angeles, California.
Well, they were in LA, so they couldn't escape the hair metal. You're using the word glam. I would call them hair metal, but same interchangeable term
Right.
there. But the thing that was different, I think, about them is that they had an edge to them that, even, like, you got to keep in mind, Blackie. In fact, I'm pretty sure Nikki Sixx was somehow associated with the early versions of what was called Sister, and then it became Circus. I think was the second name. Sister was the first name, and then they became Wasp. And allegedly, that's through, I think, the drummer was about to be stung by a hornet or a wasp, and he was freaking out, and that somehow played into the story. But what really kind of came about was that, yeah, they were, Motley, if you remember, on the very first album, Too Fast for Love, was very glammy, man. The leather pants, the lipstick, the drag look, and all that stuff like that. And they didn't really revert to the satanic thing until the second album, 83, right? And so, which, they did proceed, as far as putting albums out, they preceded Wasp, but Wasp was in its formation stages from like 79 on. So they kind of, in a weird way, sort of predated a lot of those bands, like your Rats. I mean, all those guys were pounding around with each other, and there was a lot that was going on in that club scene and everything. But you're right. It's a great point. Wasp was always kind of like that outlier band. Like there's something weird about them, and they're just a little bit more anarchical or a little bit more edge fringe, right?
Sure. And I think so it to my kind of where I was going is it gives you a time and a place, but it doesn't accurately describe their sound.
Yeah.
And there's something going on to the stage show, the lyrical content, right? They pushed beyond, I think, what the stereotype image was, and then also introduced themes to our conversation earlier, like that just took it over the edge, where everyone was kind of playing around with like innuendo and
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no, we will
We'll
be the
do
monster.
this.
We will
We'll be that
be,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Very good point.
So, and I think that's one of the reasons that I think this record is so important is for me, it personifies even on a pop culture sort of visible level. Yeah, I completely Damage was saying about Alice Cooper, right? There's an element of shock rock going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
they, in a lot of ways, to me, are the sort of antagonist culturally that exists in the 1980s. This record is perfect 1980s culturally in a way that
Mm-hmm.
transcends, I think, just the metal scene in California, right? Out of all the different heavy metal records to come out of the 1980s, there are a few that are so culturally impactful and visible, and I still think retain a level of iconography that few records do from that era, and I think still speak to this record. You know, there are others that did better on the charts, that sold more, but like if you look at how much influence this has, all the different metal bands that have covered their songs,
Mm-hmm.
songs from this set that have this album that have remained in their live
In the
set,
set. Yep.
like
With the exception of the one that Blackie sort of denounced for quite a long while, but now thanks to popular pressure and maybe his shifting views on it, it came back, I believe, for the last time that
yeah, I
or
mean,
last set they
I've heard him. He's of someone who's I think has evolved,
Yeah, that's a
dramatically over the course of
good
his
way to put it.
career.
Yeah.
And I think this sort of narrative arc for him personally that starts with the debut record and ends kind of with Crimson Idol as sort of this resurrection story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a great place to start. And for me, one of the outside of its cultural influence and how it defined, I think, what heavy metal was in terms of being this cultural antagonist that was problematic and that
Right.
parents needed to solve, like that part of 1980s heavy metal is incredibly influential and important. And beyond that cultural impact, I think it also is definitive because you have to start here to understand the trajectory. This is even before the songs that we talk about that I'm going to love and praise and so on and so forth.
Sure.
But you're going to have to understand where this band begins in terms of Blackie's sort of trajectory through his career in order to appreciate where he arrives later on.
Right.
I think this is to see him as a villain.
Exactly, and he relished that early on. He really did.
100%.
He fucking
100%.
loved that shit. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, and he relished almost being the villain of the LA metal scene because he was the guy that was like kind of just very abrupt. He wasn't very. He was. I mean, I remember. I've never seen Wasp. Shockingly, sadly, I've just never seen him. I was gonna go the thing with Armored Saint, and I might, if I'm still here, I'll probably. Are they doing that? No, they canceled it, right? I think they canceled it.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, they canceled it because of Blackie had to have a back surgery, but they were going to do a second round. I did not go to the one down in Baltimore, and from what I heard, I'm kind of glad I didn't because it was still pandemic-y at that point in time, and I didn't trust.
Sure.
I just didn't trust being out at that point, and I heard that place was like overloaded. People were trying to get in that didn't have tickets and trying to score tickets at the door, and it was just packed at the soundstage, which is about 1,000. So, but I've never seen them live, and from what I, there's bands like Guar. I mean, Guar certainly has done that, and obviously Alice Cooper, is the touchstone for most of the shock sort of thing, the live shock sort of thing. But I remember seeing interviews of Blackie, like early interviews, and he's a very intellectual dude. He's a very smart guy, and he can be a little bit obtuse. He can just be a little bit like, why should I be talking to you? That kind of thing.
Sure. He struck me though, is like when you compare him to the other sort of front men.
Yeah, like Vince
right. Like you can tell he had a very different kind of awareness, not just in terms of his conversations with the media, but the lyrical content that he wanted to talk about. And to me, I hear that even on this first record. So it probably, by the time we get to Crimson Idol and we talk about Headless Children for you, it becomes far more sort of explicit. But I think he always, in some way, like, Alice Cooper came up, there was this element of shock rock that requires a little bit of intellectual engagement with history, culture, etc. That I think glam, if you only wanted to party, you could get away with that. And I think he sort of pushed the envelope in a way that he had to be very much aware of what the boundaries were before sort of reaching over them.
Right. And I mean, some of the lyrics on the first two albums do kind of revolve around the party sort of thing, but I think there was more of an intellectualism about what he was doing, particularly his writing, man, because his writing from the first, there's songs on the first album that kind of personify where he's going to go with albums like The Headless Children and Crimson Idol, and some of the songs even on Last Command. I mean, but he had a real innate sense of melody that was, I think, kind of a little unusual in their songs. The choruses to these songs, to a lot of his songs, are just so infectiously catchy, and they do kind of follow a bit of a pattern, which I'll get into when I talk about some of the songs coming up here. But I think there was just something a little different about this band, as opposed, because granted, he did write "I Fuck Like a Beast," but there wasn't a lot of those type of like chick songs, like, this is gonna get the chicks, right? This is the song that this will have all the girls pulling their tops off and that kind of stuff. Whereas that was all Motley Crue did, and Rat to a large extent, not entirely, but to a large extent, that was kind of their thing. And Dokken was kind of Don was kind of the crooner, and my love for Dokken. I do love Dokken, and I'm not gonna run away from it.
Yes.
Love George Lynch, but they were a little bit more poppy. And while there are songs on these albums that are poppy, they're darker. They're just a little bit more savage sounding sometimes, right? Right.
So how do you want to do this? Do you want to now jump into this track by track?
Yeah. Give me your rundown of the album. Well, what we should say real quick is, and I'm cheating here, guys, I apologize. This album did come out. Kellen, if you caught the very beginning of it, talked about the Fuck Like a Beast, and was it I Want to Be Somebody was the second single, or was it?
Correct.
Okay. And those preceded the album, and August 17th was the release of the first studio album. And by the way, you said you have an OG copy. Does yours say Winged Assassins on the side, on the spine? Did you ever look at that?
For the
because that's apparently the very first album. Look on the spine and see if it says Winged Assassins. Because that's, I think, the very first pressing. Like, some of them had it on there.
Oh, I don't have the Winged Assassins.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing has always been, well, what does WASP stand for? And Blackie's trip was, well, what did he say? We are stupid perverts or something? Or no?
Yeah, sexual perverts.
Well, sexual perverts was the one, but what was the other thing here? Hold on. look. There was, and I'm like not a total. Oh, here it is. So, the band name meaning. One possible interpretation is white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, which he does use that lyric in one of the songs.
Right, but
I forget the last song I believe it is on the album.
Yeah,
I don't think that's what it is. The other thing, we are sexual perverts, which was inscribed on both sides of. Oh, I'm sorry, which was inscribed on both sides around the center label. So does yours have that around the center label? And Winged Assassins was inscribed on the spine of the very first vinyl pressing. Yours might be OG, but it might not be the very, very first one. But in the round thing,
yeah. I don't. Oh,
probably in the run out groove there.
Yeah, I was trying to see if I could find it. There we are. We got it.
Got it? Yeah.
It's nice. I don't know if you're going to be able to see.
Probably not.
Yeah, it's because it's super small.
That's right. Hang on, let me blow you up.
It's okay. So it just to do this balancing act here on. It's actually listed right on inscribed on that section, but I don't know if you're going to be able to
go up. Go into the
I'll take a photo of it. Yeah,
there it is. Nah.
Yeah. Okay.
Nah. Can't get it on there. But you do have one of the originals then.
Yeah. So
and then in one interview, Blackie said, "We ain't sure, pal." For WASP, we ain't sure, pal. So who knows? You know, I mean, like, excuse me. Who knows what they were thinking? But one of the things that I thought was interesting was that apparently he wanted to call it WASP because to use the actual periods in between the letters, because allegedly, and I didn't fact check this, but it kind of sounds right. Nobody had ever done that for a name of a band before. I'm trying to remember if I can think of any that, you know, from the 60s or 70s that were just, you know, abbreviations that are acronyms, you know. So I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
And they never had like wasp creatures. They never had like pictorial.
Sure. So, there's no little like bee.
That would have been a little too obvious, right? Like Zebra, the band Zebra did use the black and white colors as their thing, and they did have a zebra on the front of one of their albums. So
no, they have penises with saw blades. So that's
yes. And by the way, you know, Blackie did take the cod piece to another level, right? But yeah, Ryan, but ELP didn't use the periods. They didn't use E period, L period, P period. They just went ELP. It was just an acronym. So go ahead, jump into it.
Yeah. So the story that I heard, and you can correct me if that's wrong, is they had the same manager as Iron Maiden.
Yeah, Rod Smallwood.
And when Capitol had asked to remove the Animal song as the lead single, that he actually fought, which is why this is on a different move from label. This is Music for Nations. Put this out. So
yep. In the UK.
In the UK. So there's that's part of the rationale was okay, we're not going to just turn away from this. We're going to try and use this as an opportunity. It'll sell, it'll be controversial, and yada yada yada.
And it was.
I mean, and they wrote
a lot.
And it you know, it was imported. Apparently, it was incredibly, once the word got out and it had gained popularity, people were trying to import it into the States throughout 1984 to get a hold of it, and it built all this sort of
hype.
Hype is this notorious band, this new coming out, and all this stuff. The song itself, I don't think is necessarily special, on its own, but I think the story surrounding it, is enough, To your point, to be this explicit in 1984, 85
Huge
was
deal.
really, pushing things in a way that to be frank, like I can understand parents being like, you can't say that, right? Especially, I don't know what your parents thought, or if they heard that if you cared at all, but
My mom probably wouldn't have said a whole lot. We weren't too preachy
worried
that
about it,
way, and
right?
she knew that my old man had a sailor's mouth too, and unfortunately can't give it to me. And now that being said, the irony of that is that if I ever do on occasion slip in front of her, man, she just berates me. Like
Right.
she just does not like me saying that word, and I'm like, Mom, it's just a fucking word. What do you mean? So
Sure.
it's disrespectful, I guess. But anyway, yeah, it was. I remember this very distinctly. Not to, I want to get you into your thing, but I asked you where you first heard of them, and for me, I first heard of them in Kerrang because the UK was picking up on this that particular issue, that song, and they kind of made a big expose about it in one of the magazines. And I was a regular Kerrang buyer. I can't remember whether it was bi-week. I think it was bi-weekly back then. I know it was monthly, but it might have been bi-weekly. It might have been. I'm thinking there was multiple issues that would come out to my local store, and he imported it, and it was like $3.50 a mag back then in the mid. I started buying it in like 84, 82. I was buying this magazine, and I was learning about these things out on the coast because you didn't have the internet to learn about them.
Right.
And if you didn't hear the song on radio, you weren't going to hear it. You weren't going to know about it. And so it was Kerrang that brought it to my attention. And of course, I'm reading this going, whoa, fuck like a beast. All right, what is this? You had to know what it was if you were into metal and you were a guy like me. You're like, man, I gotta know what this is. And I remember seeing those very early in Kerrang. In fact, the live stage show was them with the girls on the torture rack, covered in blood and big boobs hanging out, and you're like, man, this is awesome. Bring it on,
Right. And on top of that, it introduces us to Blackie's voice, which I think is a hallmark, right? Like the darkness, the grittiness of his voice, he doesn't sound like a lot of the other
guys.
Yeah.
Nope.
And
he's not a crooner like Don Dokken. He's not a whiner like Vince Neil or a rat. I mean, his rasp is savage sounding, unlike say Stephen Pearcy, who has that rasp and can't really hold a tune to sing his life or to sing for his life. I still love Rat, but he can't sing for shit. You got someone like Blackie who has this savage sounding, raspy, just evil sounding voice in a lot of ways. But it was cool. It was so cool sounding. And to your point, for me with WASP, that's the quintessential thing that sets them apart from all those other bands is Blackie's voice and his ability to use that voice and make killer harmonies but yet still sound so savage. He just sounds savage in a cool way,
Yeah, I think, it's easily the most enduring aspect of the band.
Yes.
Through all the records, it's sort of the connective tissue that binds all of them. I do think it also sounds so effortless, like in the way that it's not an affectation to his voice, right?
Right.
It is something that is completely natural in terms of how he sings and delivers. That which is why it feels so sort of fluid, despite how harsh it is.
That's the thing, though. When we describe it as like to someone, if we were describing his voice, that word savage, rasp, that harshness. But the weird thing is it's very, very melodic and tuneful. It's very much an earworm sort of thing. You almost, there are those vocalists out there that you got to warm up to. King Diamond, for me, man, it took me 20 years to get into King Diamond, right? And so And I can only do about 1 or 2 albums of King Diamond, and I'm tapped out for like a year. I'm like, I'm good. But Blackie's voice is just so fucking cool. Cool is the word I would use.
Yeah. We'll get a chance to talk about his voice. So that gets us rolling on this record.
Yep.
The second single. Okay, first off, and I know this is something that's come up, essential song to this record. I think in 1998 it actually was introduced to a CD reissue in full.
Right. Yep.
So
You're correct.
Well, I will talk about it as an inclusion to the actual full length. And if you're asking me to talk about this record, this band, without talking about the single, I think is a disingenuous effort in talking about the history of the band.
Oh, so, absolutely. No, for sure.
I would include it. And I mean, definitive, right? To talk about this band without this song, without this single, and without its controversy that followed it is you're missing the point. So an absolutely definitive song for me, which now we jump into the actual record here. So the second single that was released, and I have to hunt down because I actually do want the single, but we get into this record, second song, and a different, like, lyrically different concept. I Want to Be Somebody, but for me, what a heavy metal anthem.
Oh, it's anthemic, man.
Just I mean, there's parts of of just being in the heavy metal scene that it feels like, whatever you want to call it, like the individual against the world kind of persona, which I think if you're a teenager in the 1980s, right? If you're in high school, that song comes on. I mean, it speaks to what, that a teenager may be feeling in terms of
all about who you are. Yep.
Yeah.
All about who you are. Yep.
Yeah. And it's, I think that is one of the key things that I will hold on to. I'll probably bring up a couple of times when we talk about what makes this record definitive. Yes, the Headless Children, lyrically, it is reaching into a different world of social and political awareness.
Yep.
But this record, I think, sort of corroborated for so many young heavy metal fans in 1984 and 1985 what it meant to be a heavy metal fan.
Yeah, and I mean, Blackie is 27, 28 in this range. He's about 10 years older than me. So, when I'm getting into this type of metal in 82, 83, 84, you're right. And you brought up the word anthem, and I'm glad you said that, because Blackie has a lot of those type of anthemic songs throughout his career where they just have that. They're made for putting your arms in the air and fucking, doing the fist thing and doing the. I mean, he just had a knack for writing those kind of songs. And certainly, I Want to Be Somebody, man. Come on,
yeah. It says everything, right?
Yeah.
Big chorus, but it's also one of the faster songs here on this record. And I do think that's also something we'll include is it in 1984, 85, metal, and I say it has become a little bit heavier, it's become a bit more aggressive. And I think WASP tapped into that, not only, in terms of the image and the lyrics and the stage show, but sonically it feels a bit more aggressive, right? Than something that could have preceded it. Early part of the 80s. Like, they've tapped into like what is happening in California in a way that would speak to why they could potentially tour with a very young Metallica, right? Which happened in this time period in the band's career. So,
geez, I didn't actually know that they did. They opened for Metallica.
I don't know in terms of who was the headlining role, but I think in 1984, 85. So,
that's right, because Metallica was an LA band actually. They went up north to be with Cliff,
and so that would have been Ride the Lightning era. So, there's some interesting sort of like a tour that was going on, but I think this band is much more approachable in terms of having these enormous choruses. And that brings us into this might be my favorite. So Love Machine. We get a music video for it as well. Now this song apparently had been in rotation for a long time. It precedes the formation of WASP. So I think in the Circus era, this song had been played for a long time. And Chris Holmes apparently he made some changes to the instrumentation on the song, but the sort of Blackie singing solo while there's sort of that double bass rolling through the verses. I think that was something that he contributed to the makeup of the song. But Love Machine, I also like the lyric, the second verse on that. I love the line, what do I move in you, and am I what I seem? Like, in terms of a song that it's really just talking about whatever, I'm this crazy love machine. It's also like a warning, right? There's like an element of once again danger to his love, right? To this persona. And I think as this sort of cultural whatever antagonist villain, he owns that role several times during the course of this record. And even talking about like relationships, which something that Glam did incredibly well, like, how you want to talk about how, sex and dating and all that glam stuff, or hair stuff, as you would call it. I think he continually injects a little bit of, there's some problem here, right? Like it's not going to be just like a good time. There's something dangerous about this record. And I think Love Machine is like one of those songs where it's as on its face is kind of fun, but you read into a little bit further and there's like an element of like, you shouldn't be dating this guy.
You probably shouldn't be fucking. Yeah. I'm probably going to ruin you. I'm probably going to ruin you.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. Phil has it. Blackie's Love.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll tell you what, that song though, probably my favorite song on the album, but there's another one that I really like too. But the thing about that is, and I don't know if you ever watched any of the Fifth Angel stuff I've done with the band and whatnot, but literally within a year and a half, Fifth Angel did their second album for Columbia. I think it was in '89. So, okay, it was 5 years later. Yeah, '89. They had a song there called 7 Hours. And it literally is 7 hours. It's LOVE. It's the same thing. And like I pointed that out to Ken, and he's like, "Holy shit, damn, you're right. It's exactly the same." And he told the other guys in the band, the guy Ed that wrote it, and I said to Ed, I said, "You are aware that you kind of ripped that off of Blackie, right?" He's like, "I didn't try to. I really didn't." But I mean, it's just funny. I mean, it's a universal thing, right? I mean, but you can't help sometimes be influenced by the things that you're listening to, right? And it's just such a killer chorus, man. That chorus is so good.
Right. You get the LO, and then it's followed by that massive floor tom hit. Yeah.
So good. And like Phil just said, he's had it stuck in his head. It'll be stuck in my head all night too.
Yeah, it's such a good song. So we have Animal, I Want to Be Somebody, and moving to Love Machine.
Right away. Bangers. All bangers.
Are just bangers. Like, this record would be on its own. Like if it was just those 3 songs, it'd be worth it.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
no doubt. I mean, there's no doubt this one gets off to a fucking torrential downpour of killerness right off the bat, right?
So we move into the 4th song here, which is something that WASP sort of keeps in touch with. The Flame for me sounds like a arena rock song that emerged from the 1970s. Like that could be an AC/DC song to me. And once again, another big chorus, but you hear sort of Blackie's sort of melodic sensibility in how he delivers that chorus.
Right.
Right. It's super sort of bluesy, big rock kind of sound. It moves us a little bit away from sort of the speed that we've been living with for the past early 3 songs.
Right.
But slows it down a little bit. It's still as infectious. By no means to me, like I never feel like I want to skip the song. More than anything, it keeps some identity of this band that separates it, right? It's a true hard rock song. I don't feel it is like it's the first time on this record where it's not could be associated with sort of the glam LA scene. It feels like this band also has one foot in
You know
1970.
what it reminds me a little bit of? It reminds me a little bit of, not just because it's called The Flame, but it kind of reminds me of a Cheap Trick song. It's got a Cheap Trick vibe to it.
Right.
And I will say, well, I'll hold off. I'll do my opinion of everything once you're done.
Okay. The last one here. Now this is interesting. So School Days, I just love the contrast of this song versus
You missed. Oh, did you want to mention Bad or no?
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed Bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So Bad, for this one, the lyrical content I think is interesting here. The song for me isn't quite as intriguing. It's not a I wouldn't skip the song by any means.
Right.
But it's also I think shows right the kind of individuals Blackie wants to write about. And once again, if he's sort of, for me, as much as he's sort of being the antagonist or the bad guy, the villain on these records, Bad to me seems like he's also reaching out to people who potentially identify with that identity. These are like broken people to some extent. And that song, I know he's, talked about in interviews, like people had come up to him who were dealing with depression and so on and so forth. And that reached out to them, right? It wasn't like it was a band that had tons of visibility and popularity, but he was also going to write about like the ugly individuals in society in a way that I think they sort of identified with and picked up on. So that's something that we see from the first record, like he gets right, and we're going to hold on to that through his career. I really think it's a glimpse into his self-awareness as a lyricist that potentially a lot of the bands in the era didn't share. So
yeah, and I do think I will say some of the lyrics on some of these songs are not that great. I think he gets much better as a writer as he goes along. This being one of the songs. I mean, this, I'm just going to be honest with you. I actually like this song, but the chorus lyrics are pretty bad. I mean, not to trade on that, but I mean, just reading it here, it's B-A-D. He actually spells it out. He likes spelling words out. L-O-V-E. But anyway, B-A-D, bad, makes your mom and daddy sad. Bad, it's the bloody fix you do. Oh, look out. Not sure exactly what he was getting at there with that, but that's one of the ones that I'm kind of like, okay. But then you got stuff like Sleeping in the Fire, which is really cool, where he really taps in. We're getting ahead of ourselves.
So not necessarily like the best song on the record, but here's the probably the biggest issue that I have. Oh, maybe I'll save this to the end, but I do want what you're bringing up here in terms of what this record potentially does not offer by comparison to the later records. I also think is going to be something that we need to return to when we sort of circle back to what critically is acclaimed and what many critics think is important or praiseworthy within rock and metal. Because
always a subjective thing.
Always a subjective thing, but I will kind of save my closing thoughts here because I think that's important to keep track of. So
yeah, I'm sorry to interject when you're talking about a track, but I did want to. I was reading those. I was listening to it earlier, and I'm like, man, am I hearing what I think I'm hearing on this? So I wanted to look at the lyric sheet. And it was like, oh, Okay.
Well,
Gotcha.
because I could say the same thing about School Days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's your classic like disenfranchised youth song.
Yes.
Um, but I compare this to like Smoking in the Boys' Room
Smoke,
or whatever.
and that's exactly what the song is. Yeah,
Right.
it's exactly what it is. And
Um,
I'll throw this out here now. The three songs what we're talking about right in a row there: the Flame, the School Days, and Bad are to me the weak points on the album. It gets much stronger after those three tracks. And the reason I say that is because the opening tracks were the first three opening tracks are such bangers that when I got to these three, I was like, man, I kind of forgot these, and now I kind of see why. They're just are they skippers? No, they're not skippers for me, but to me they're not great tracks. Those three tracks. That's just me. So go ahead.
I can totally. I wouldn't fight you there. I mean, I wouldn't say there. I never feel
They're,
like I have to
they're the
skip a
weak.
single song.
They're
Yeah,
just the weak points on the album for me.
right,
That's all. That's all I'm
right.
gonna
But
say.
I totally those three tracks relative to the first three. If I had to
Oh,
pick, right, it's not even a contest,
well, it's
right?
not a contest at all, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and that kind of is a weird part. That's the weird part of the album that you're like, man, it gets off to such a scorching start, and then it kind of it meanders a little bit, and then it picks up again. It picks
right.
up quite a bit with the next track after School Day.
Okay, so just how
For
it plays
me,
out here on vinyl, right? This is
right,
only 38 minutes long as a if you don't include the single.
right,
So it was recorded for vinyl, um, and the pacing of it, you get this big start and it sort of slows down a little bit. We go over to side B and it opens with Hellion, which
yeah,
is a
killer,
great song.
killer track, yeah,
And once again, it injects this sort of a pace to it. So it reminds me a little bit like I Want to Be Somebody, where it's a much more up tempo song.
mm-hmm.
Um, his delivery of the chorus and the Hellion line has tons of conviction. So um, this is another one that not only is like, you know, heavy metal on fire kind of deal, but
Mm-hmm.
I think coming out of the lull that you got finishing side A, it sort of reawakens, right? The lights come on in the party a little bit.
Right, mm-hmm. For sure,
So love that song.
love
Um,
it.
here now, that moves us to Sleeping in the Fire. Now,
Mm.
this comparison and contrast, when we get to the slow song and Headless Children, dear God, the comparison with that song and this song, because this is really the ballad on the record,
It's the ballad. It's the big rock ballad for
right?
sure, and it's
Uh,
great. I love it. I
oh,
love this song, man.
like Tiamat covered it.
Oh, they did? I
Yes,
didn't know that. Okay, wow.
but you
Check
can
that out.
get like the doom and gloom here, and it's kind of like an occult song, right?
Yeah, he's mentioning Luciferian shit and like what's it say? Had it open here. And the chorus. Here's the other thing. Blackie is so good at writing killer fucking heavy ballads. It's this song. It's
right,
on Headless Children. It's Forever Free. On The Idol. It's The Idol. It's just he knows how to write a killer ballad, man.
right.
So the lyrics are it goes into
The
the chorus
Lucifer's
there.
magic that makes you numb. The
That's it.
passion and all the pain are one.
Yeah.
You're sleeping in the fire.
Sleeping
Yeah,
in the Fire, yeah. And that's such a cool title for a song. Sleeping in the Fire. Like it just the juxtaposition of those two things, right?
right. And I think this is probably one of the major things that differentiates potentially, like, in terms of probably Crimson Idol is the best example of a concept record. Um, he's kind of while in the kind of speaking to the same fans here, he's a little bit, it's not a singular topic that
Right,
occupies all these songs.
right.
Um, but if you ever thought that he was going to lose touch, this band was not going to be dark and brooding. Like this is a great example of how to do a ballad for a glam band that still retains some level of like danger, right?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
So this is another great song. So to move from Hellion into this one, killer.
Killer track. Yep.
Yeah. Um, On Your Knees
Love
I
this
mean,
song.
I think this is not a bad song by any means, but I coming off the first two, it also just kind of feels like you reached a plateau.
It's got a really catchy chorus. It's got that anthemic sort of
Right.
vibey chorus though.
Right.
Yeah.
And a little bit of like, hey, sexual innuendo here. It's sort of,
Mm-hmm.
a evil figure and also a sexual, submission. So
Get on your
you're
knees for
right.
me. Yes.
Right. Right. But not a bad song. The next one, Tormentor, is an interesting one. Speaking about cultural impact, when I listen to this record, it's not necessarily the first song I grabbed, but Tormentor was included in 2 movies.
Really?
Yeah, so it was
Yeah,
pulled.
I didn't know
I'll
that.
pull it up. Yeah, so Tormentor was heard in 2 films: The Dungeon Master, 1984. So
Okay.
basically after its release, and then Terror Vision in 1986.
Oh, that's right. I do remember that. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So for anyone who out there who's 1980s film buff, they may recognize that. But another one of those things where it's a timeless 80s sort of cult classic record, and people who are involved in those movies or watching those movies back
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
in there as well. So that, I guess, Dungeon Master, or I'm sorry, so Tormentor, and then The Torture Never Stops. So now this is, the last 3 songs for me aren't really the highlights on side B either. I think it
Right.
really, Hellion and Sleep in the Fire are the major standouts here.
Mm-hmm.
But by no means would I call them poor, bad songs
Right.
where you would need to skip them on this record.
No, not at all. Not at all.
This, for me, how the terms of how it plays out, the first part for each side, they climb and then they plateau and they don't let you down.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how the energy of listen plays out. So, in terms of, the pacing of it, that works for me. I don't feel like there's such a lull where I ever need to skip a song or change it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I can play it out. It's short enough. It's not too long. There's
Right.
really,
Doesn't overstay its welcome.
yeah,
Right.
doesn't overstay its welcome.
How about production wise? The one thing on the album that I'm not super crazy about is it's got that reverby drum sound, but all 80s records have that. You know what I mean?
And this is what I love about it.
Really?
Yes. I don't think you can be this kind of dark band without an additional element of atmosphere that you find in the production.
Mhm.
This band here, it feels its most carnal on this record due to that kind of guitar production. I think if you're going to make a complaint, his bass is a bit buried in the mix.
Yeah. I'm trying to
Uh,
see who did the Mike Varney Shrapnel guy. I didn't actually realize he was the producer with Black Youngers. How about that, Mike Varney? I didn't realize that. That's unusual.
But I mean, in the same sense that if this band emerges from the stage, I don't want it to be great polished production. There's an element of sleazy reverb production on this record that I think gives it tons of personality. And it's messy and sloppy and greasy, and that's what I love about this band in this era.
Well, we should probably talk about, when you say messy, we should probably talk a little bit about Chris Holmes, because Chris is the other pivotal character in this band. That Randy Piper was with him for the first album. Was he on the second? He might have been on the second album. I can't remember.
It might have been the last one with him.
It was, definitely was. I think he was on The Last Command. I think. Let me look. Yeah, he was. And Steve Riley came in and took over on the drums for this album. Steve Riley, who just passed away, I believe, not too long ago. L.A. Guns, Steve Riley. I love Chris Holmes. What a character. What a guy. What a crazy character. Of course, most of us know him most famously for his scene in with the Decline of Western Civilization Part 3, is it? Or I think it's Part 3 or Part 2, whatever.
Sure.
And we know him sitting in the pool with his mom sitting there, drinking fucking vodka. Who knows if it was real? I've heard that it was water, but he's drunk out of his mind, allegedly. And who knows how much of it was real and what was staged. But
Right.
Here's the thing. I love Chris Holmes. I do not think Chris Holmes is an amazing guitar player. I'm not going to lie to you. And that's just me. He's a good melodic soloist, but he's not like a Lynch. He's not even a Warren DeMartini or a Jakey Lee. He's not on that level. But he plays what's necessary for the songs. You know what I mean? They're not, the WASP songs aren't necessarily, especially on this first album and the second album, they're not meant to be, prog metal songs. You know what I mean? So, but he does play some interesting solos that are kind of fun. But I do think sometimes he gets this reputation as being this amazeballs guitar player, and I just don't think that's true at all.
I don't think that, right. I agree with that, but I don't think that's the charm of his solo playing or even the riffs that they choose. Right. This is a band that's it's not about their complexity in terms of musicianship, right? It's overall like the emotional impact that the songs play out. They're great songs.
Right.
And fronted by a legendary vocalist. So what I do think stands out here, though, is this is the first time where to me, and I think Last Command, you could probably say the same thing as well. It's not just the Blackie Lawless show. This band here feels cohesive, right? This record feels cohesive. And I think one of the things that plague, WASP later on is a inconsistency of circulating band members where you don't have the same you're showing up for the Blackie experience. It becomes a band that is sort of his musical vehicle, as opposed
because he primarily wrote most of the material. Holmes gets in on some of the songs, but not it is Blackie's in charge.
Right.
I mean, that's just the reality of it. And the thing is, like, I don't know if you've never been in bands, it's kind of hard, like 30,000 foot view. If you're not in a band, bands generally have to have one or two guys that are the prime movers. In other words, you need guys that you can't have too many chiefs because then nothing ever gets done because you never agree on anything, right? So you got to have that one or two guys that are the guys that make shit happen, right? And that's just the way it is. And with WASP, without Blackie, they probably don't really go anywhere. You know what I mean? Not realistic. So you need that driving force to keep things rolling. And Blackie was always that guy. It's always been his thing. So, I guess, and my I wasn't criticizing the production. I like the production, but I see what you're saying about that, giving the album sort of some character.
And I think it's probably for the two of us the greatest point, one of the major points of division, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
What makes the production here for me appealing is potentially why I like it less than Headless Children.
Headless is a little more polished. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
No doubt at all.
This is I you don't want to. If I sleep with WASP on this record, I probably need a penicillin shot the next day. Like, you know what I mean? It's where right.
That's kind of creepy.
There's something problematic about this record, the sound of it. It feels for the first a threatening record, a problematic record,
right?
Sonically, right?
Yep.
And in a way that, for me, Headless Children, for all of its, I'd be interested to get your thoughts when we get to Headless Children, but
we're almost there.
Yeah. I think it is a change in band identity to some extent. And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And for me, that was sort of like a point of contention where
Okay, I got you. So for me, just running through these, we talked about the first three. I don't really need to say anymore, man. I love all three of those songs. I have no problem, had no problem the other day putting on this album, rolling the window down, even though it was 42 degrees out, and cranking the shit out of Fuck Like a Beast. And I don't care if anyone saw me. If there was, would I drive through a Christian community with that blaring? Yeah, I probably would. I probably would. That's me. But I have no problem with that. So like you said, I Want to Be Somebody, man. That's a ripper. That's kind of like almost like the thrash track on the album in a weird way, if you want to go that route. Love Machine, man. That and Sleeping in the Fire are my two favorite tracks on the album. I am a sucker for the power ballad, man. That's got that gritty sort of vibe to it. The Alone Agains and that stuff like that. I just love that shit. Call Me a Softie. I don't. But I love Sleeping in the Fire. Hellions Killer. I do not like School Days, man. I do not like that track. I just don't like it. I don't like the way it starts. I don't like the gang vocals on it. It's very 80s sounding with the whole gang vocal approach thing, which I struggle with a lot of that stuff. I really do. Like like a good example of that. When Priest in '86, 2 years later, did Turbo, they had a bunch of that shit. They had the Parental Guidance. You know that song, right? We don't need no. The big stacked vocals. It was like, and like that in the '80s just didn't work on a lot of songs for me. And that was one that I don't particularly care for. The Flame, I like Cheap Trick and all, and that was the band I thought of when I was listening to that. But that song really doesn't do much for me. I do actually, even though the lyrics are bad, I do like Bad. I actually think it's not a bad song. On Your Knees, I kind of dig too. I like Tormentor, and The Torture Never Stops. I mean, come on, how can you not like a song called The Torture Never Stops? Like you have to like it just for the title alone, right? And we mentioned Hellion is fucking badass too. So, for me, now my copy has Show No Mercy on it, 7-inch B-side, and Paint It Black. They do a cover of Rolling Stones' Paint It Black.
Right.
They do a lot of covers.
But that was on a later release that
later,
was included.
Later, yeah. It's okay. It's not my favorite of their cover versions. They've done much better. We'll talk about one coming up. If I had to score this album on a 10 scale, I would probably give it an 8.75. I would love to go higher, but I will say that those three tracks after the opening three tracks really it drops the album for me a little bit. Now, and that's just me. I understand you're probably going to be different from that, but I think that, and I'm very liberal with giving out 9s and 9.5s, and very rarely get 10s. But yeah, I could almost maybe go a 9 on it. Probably would be about where I would stop. But are those songs skippers? No, they're not skippers. They're not that song where you go, oh God, I can't listen to this song. I hate this song. They're just not that. But and the artwork alone is just, I mean, this guy here, Tony, I forget his name now, but
oh come on, it
Tony,
is classic. It is so iconic.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's silly.
It's
Chris Holmes.
It's silly, but like perfect 1980s, right? Like
you wonder how much. But you wonder how much blow they did before that shoot, that photo shoot, right?
Oh my God. It's like these styrofoam rocks.
I know. Yeah. Styrofoam rocks, right.
They got these the eyes are too far apart.
Yeah, they're way far apart. One of them's really clear and the other one, like, did you notice that? Like one is like real bright and the other one's like kind of like clouded and half open, and yeah, it's pretty pathetic, but I dig it though. And the plastic skeleton is just a pièce de résistance. That's it right there. So, all right,
All right.
let's
Before
get
we
into
before you jump into Headless Children, can I use the bathroom quick? I'll
Oh
be
yeah,
right
yeah,
back.
yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. Somebody came in earlier, and I'll just talk to this, mention this here. Let me see who jumped in. Let me see. Hold on. Someone popped in up here. I want to make sure I say the right person. Oh, here we go. No solution. What's up, dude? I know you. I just can't think of who it is. Who are you? I know you. I don't. I can't put a name to it. It's been. I'm feeling pretty grim today. I'm really hungover. We were up late last night streaming, Marty and I, and Nick and Dennis, and man, I was putting the fucking wine away. Holy shit. Anywho, in fact, I drank an entire bottle of wine on top of about 4 beers. I never do that. Like, haven't done that in 15 years. My body's telling me don't ever do that again. So yeah, you mentioned the Crimson Idol. I really struggled between these two, which one I wanted to go with. I was almost there with this, and then I kind of ran out of time to give it another fair couple of listens to pin up against this one. This one here. I have a sentimental, maybe nostalgic sort of attachment to this, in particular, Forever Free. I'll get to that when we talk about the tracks. But yeah, man, these two to me are for me the pinnacles of the catalog, and this one has a couple of Blackie's very best tracks on it. So I was almost there, but I didn't go there. I just didn't. I stuck with this.
Yeah, to be perfect, just to be clear, I know when I first reached out to Jeff to do this, he was like, "Which one do I choose?" And I think you've gone back and forth about.
I was back and forth on it a lot, and I was listening to this one a lot last week, and then I was like, "Oh, I really got to go pay attention to this one because I know this one better." But I was like, "Yeah, I got to go back and re kind of visit some of these," and I just couldn't. I went with this initially, and I told you that's what I was going with, and I decided to stick with it. But man, there are a couple songs on this album like "The Idol" and fucking "Murders in the New Morgue" or "Rue Morgue" or what's it called, New Morgue, right? "Chainsaw Charlie," fucking "Arena of Pleasure," "The Idol," and "The Great Misconception of Me." Wow, where he brings the chorus back from the Idol, man. I mean, just so fucking good. But let's get into this one here, "The Headless Children," which comes out in 1980. Give me a moment here. Should have had this ready. Didn't. This comes out in 1989. It is released through Capitol. Reached number 48 on Billboard 200 chart, which was the band's highest chart position. Remained on the chart for 13 weeks. Last album WASP released before the temporary breakup in 1990, only to reunite 2 years later with the Crimson Idol in 92. This was produced by Blackie Lawless. I thought Spencer Proffer was involved in this. Nope, it was. Okay, it was. Spencer Proffer, Pasha was his label. He did the last two. He did Inside the Electric Circus, which is my least favorite of the first five. I mean, I like it, but I don't love it. There's some down moments on that, and then The Last Command, which I love, man. That's another great one. But yeah, so any notes here? Do we need to note anything here? Says here, Headless Children showcases a new level of maturity compared to the previous three albums, which had stereotypically lewd rock and roll lyrics. Politics and social issues are now a theme. The cover art is based on Gateway to Stalingrad. Here we go. A cartoon by Daniel R. Fitzpatrick depicting a string of historical figures. Heinrich Himmler is on there, Benito Mussolini, Manson, Jim Jones, Idi Amin. Yeah, they're all despots. Pol Pot, Al Capone, Ku Klux Klan, Jack Ruby. Yeah, Ayatollah. Although I don't think the Ayatollah's on here. I'll have to.
That may have been removed later on.
Yeah, I think it is, unless I'm. There is a figure here with this figure right here. Do you have that one?
I
Do you have
don't.
this one?
I
Okay.
don't.
This guy right here has a cross on, but he doesn't have the turban. So I don't think they all. The Ayatollah always had the turban on. So let's see. This album features Frankie Banali of because Steve Riley left to go to LA Guns, and it has Frankie Banali of Quiet Riot on it, and also on keyboards, and in none of the pictures, actually, interestingly, because there are pictures of Frankie with the band, but on keyboards, which are featured more on this album than any prior WASP albums, that Ken Hensley of Uriah Heep. If you know the song Rainbow Demon, that's Ken Hensley, or the Wizard. That's him singing on there. And he adds a really cool dimension. There's no doubt about it. So for this album, man, there's not one song here I don't really love. It gets off to the races with the Lost Child, the Heretic, and man, that song, it's got that typical sort of mid-tempo groove to it where it's just sort of chugging along, and then it kind of about 3 or 4 minutes in, it switches up and it adds that really cool little arpeggio. I'm trying to remember the melody off the top of my head here. It's like 4 notes, and then the song kind of takes a 90-degree turn, and it becomes this much more up-tempo, groovy monster, and it's 7 minutes long, man. It's like, whoa, like a fucking 7. This is like a prog song almost, right? Which makes sense that I would love this album a little more because there are longer songs on it, and I tend to groove on that progressive nature of. I would not call this a prog metal album at all, but it's got a little bit more of a 340. That's it right there. That riff, yeah, so good, man. I love that. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say that's to me that little guitar break sounds like the Edge from U2, which is a major like. For me, that's the first thing every single time I hear that. I'm like, that does not sound like the Chris Holmes lick from the first. That is totally different.
It's very that would probably be the one moment on the album that you're like, whoa, is this a fucking prog album? Like, what happened right there, right? That's more like you'd hear on a Fates Warning album or a Dream Theater album, right? And it actually it elevates the song it takes it in a different direction. And not only that, the song is kind of dark to begin with, but the minute that figure comes in, it gets light. Do you know what I mean? Like there's almost like it's almost like a happy moment, like you know what I mean? But I love it. I love it. So The Real Me is the cover they do of The Who. If there's one thing on the album I could do without this song. I don't hate it. I don't skip it because they do it really, really well. It's a well done cover. It fits the Blackie Lawless sort of vibe, right? I mean, it fits his sort of modus operandi about him talking about himself, maybe introspectively, perhaps. I don't know.
Sure.
And then, man, then we get to some of the killer shit, man. The Headless Children. Oh, I love that song so much.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so great. And it's just dark. Again, almost 6 minutes long? I think it's over 6 minutes, actually, right? It's just a dark, brooding beast of a song with killer riffs and just Blackie's, singing that chorus, man. It's so intense, right? Then you've got Thunderhead, which is a really, really cool song. Again, a little bit proggy, man. It's got the intro with the keyboards, and you're like, well, what are we getting into here, man? Is this moving into like Journey territory here? What's going on? But I love that song, man. Then you got Mean Man, which is Chris Holmes' song. And I'm a mean motherfucker. It's like, man, that song just kicks my ball sack. It's a punch in the face, and it's unrelenting. And yes, Chris is not a fucking shredder. He's not that guy. But this song really, really, really kicked ass. They only played the Who cover? Are you serious? That's fucked up, man. Yeah, I think you're right. No Solution. It should have been a bonus track. Okay, Neutron Bomber, man. Another ass kicker, man. Got a little bit of a proggy edge on that. And then Mephisto's Waltz. It's kind of a little interlude, sort of an acoustic guitar sort of thing. And then we get to the ballad, man. We get to the power ballad. For me, one of the greatest power ballads of the 80s is this song. This song is so fucking cool, dude. And you're probably going to shit all over it or something. I have this feeling that you think it's like a fucking terrible song. But I love this song. Now, I have to explain. I saw the video. It's got Chris and Blackie riding their Harleys. I think Johnny Rod's there too. I'm not making any apologies. I fucking love this song. Now, I would play this song with an old girlfriend. I think it probably reminds me a little bit nostalgically of what was good at the time there. There was some good stuff going on there, and it was pretty happy man. And then it all kind of fell apart, like everything in my life. But I fucking love Forever Free. And then you got Man Eater, which is it's a great song. Not a skipper, kind of probably one of the lesser tracks on the album. And then you got Rebel in the FDG, which stands for fucking degenerate generation. And you read the lyrics, and that song reminds me a lot of Wild Child. It's got that Wild Child vibe to it, which Wild Child might be my favorite, all-time favorite fucking WASP song. That song is so killer, right? Which we're not going to get into because that's another album. But it's a great closer, man. And yeah, you're right. It's more polished. There's no question about it. It's more polished. It's got the keyboards in there, which you didn't have much of on the first two albums. You got more of it on the third album. But it's darker. We've moved away from sex. We moved away from fucking. We moved away from doing drugs, drinking and partying and being blind in Texas and all that stuff, right? And we're now at a much more elevated story. And really, there's some storytelling going on in here that carries into the concept album that becomes the Idol, because the Heretic is kind of a mini sort of story unto itself, and then the Headless Children. So I love this album, man. I love it. So there you go. What's your take? Can't wait to hear what you say about Forever Free. I know where this is going.
So okay, the first thing, Heretic started off, and I mean the production stands out for me immediately. What I do think is the major sort of dividing factor here, though, is lyrically where this album goes is a bit more deliberate in its construction, right? Sure. Like I think at this point, as we're talking about 89 here, like no one's really paying attention to the glam scene, right? And one of the things that WASP did that sort of helped them sort of push through and extend the life, I think, was they were not caught up in like the party world of LA.
The LA, yep, yeah. The Strip, the Sunset Strip thing, yep.
There was more going on, like musically. This is much more of like a straight up hard rock, or to your point, a little bit of prog you want to call that
hard rock, yep. Mm-hmm.
But the sleaziness of the LA scene has kind of left the sound. Heretic for me is kind of starts the record with a mission statement lyrically. To me, the songs I think are a bit more complex in their structure to some degree.
Absolutely, yep. Mm-hmm.
So
they're denser. They're denser too, I think.
Right.
There's a lot more going on. You now added keyboards in there, which fattens the pie, so to speak, or the meal, and that probably is why I tend to favor it a little bit, because it's a little more grandiose.
Sure. So the scale opens up a bit, but I mean, where that guitar break in the first, it just feels to me like a totally different band. And the last thing I want to associate my smut with is U2. So
I did not think of U2, but I won't lie that every time that comes on, it does catch me off guard.
it has that sort of
bit.
ringing guitar tone that I associate with the Edge. So
Yeah.
For me, it was a weird sort of like head turner moment. But I think lyrically, it also points at gives us a compass as to where this album is headed. Second track, a Who cover, like it makes sense, but to put it as number 2 on the album kind of feels. I think that's strange to do that.
Yeah.
I like original content being up in front of the record, and then your cover, hopefully, if it holds true, it's placed at the end of the record and still works in terms of identity with the band. I think it's strange to have it, and there's like the horn arrangements in it. As much as like you may enjoy additional instrumentation,
not that. No.
Yeah,
I'm not. I'm. That's the one point on this album that's a sore thumb for me. I wish they'd left that off. I really do. However, if I'm not wrong, let me double check. If I'm not wrong about this, I believe. Yeah. Hold on. So if I'm not wrong, I believe that this was the one lone single off of it, right? Oh no, Forever Free.
Of course.
Forever Free. Of course it was, right. Let me look. Hold on.
I think singles. So I'm looking at it here. Mean Man was the debut single.
Was it really?
Yep. The Real Me was the second, and Forever Free was the third.
I'm shocked that they put Mean Man out there. It had to have been. Was it cleaned up or was it?
I'm sure.
It was 89. They still weren't playing the F-bomb.
I mean, at this point, the censorship is in place, right?
Yeah. So it's still there. Yeah.
You probably had censored records and then, the explicit ones. So.
Oh, right. That's right. They did stickers on them. That's right. Yep.
Oh, bringing it all back. Okay. So that's Real Me. Really, at this point, I am not sold on this record, which has a very different sort of track listing identity than the debut, right? Which is all the heat up front. Versus this one, it kind of takes us a little bit to get into the songs that are, for me, are most impactful.
Mm-hmm.
But I completely agree. The first, keeper, like a song I would return to, is the title track here.
So good.
Yeah, it's the first song on the record that feels like the Wasp that I love. So, yeah, that's the sort of breakdown that comes off of towards the end of the song. Just yes, classic track.
Yep.
First one that I think, and once again, cohesive lyrically, right? So,
by the way, I forgot to ask you one thing. What was the first album you got by them, or that you heard entirely?
It's the debut.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, and that's usually what happens. Now, I have to say that the first one I got was not the debut; it was Last Command. And then I grabbed but I knew about Fuck Like a Beast, but the singles I knew, but I did not own the album for a long time.
What I was what I was introduced, kind of quick, segue here or breakaway from detour of our conversation.
Right.
So the debut is the one that initially I was aware of, and then I was pointed towards Crimson Idol in a way that was like, oh yeah, this is the one that you probably haven't heard of. It's not as whatever controversial, but is a peak record for the band. So
right.
Anyway, so Thunderhead. This is another song that I like. Probably one of the more intense. I mean, it's about heroin, right? It's essentially the Thunderhead, the shape of a bag of heroin. And the weird like moment where he's sort of like in conversation, like it's the personification as Satan as a drug, right? Where he's talking about like obedience to this thunderhead, this drug, this heroin.
Yeah.
But I love like there's I think it's Chris's solo that comes after that sort of back and forth dialogue that happens like in the bridge. There's an interesting sort of, it starts with a slower part of the solo, it speeds up and then takes off. I like the out of that transition from the back and forth sort of exchange lyrically and the concept of the song toward the way the solo ends. I like that part. So second song I like. Moves us to Out of Thunderhead, side B. We go to Mean Man. This is like a very bluesy riff.
Yep. Well, that's Chris.
Right. It's a super bluesy song. So it for me is also a return to that sort of like, they've kept a little bit of the hard rock 1970s. The cool part of this one though is I love the vocal syncopation that is going on here.
It's great.
When he like goes into that like storms that come in, like that sort of emphasis where he will take a consonant and sort of punch it twice. It's that's super fun. And for as up tempo as the song is, the fact that he as a vocalist has that kind of dexterity to sort of play with a riff and add a little bit more impact, super cool part. But I have to say, because you had a big night the other night, when I was going through the lyrics for this, and Mad Dog 2020's King, I drink that stuff and start getting obscene.
Yeah, and that's Chris at that point in time. That was Chris. Yeah.
I can only imagine. If anyone, that just takes me back to first starting to party. Oh my god, Mad Dog, that stuff is so nasty,
dude. It's awful. It's like drinking Listerine or something to get drunk from. Here's a quick story about Mad Dog. I was in 8th grade. I lived in Houston, Texas, where the drinking age was 18 back then. Don't think it is anymore. I think it's 21 everywhere now. But it was 18 in Houston, Texas. You could buy beer at a convenience store. So, like, you know, if you went to your Wawa or your whatever you guys have down there, Fago, I don't know what they have down there. But anyways, you go in there, you buy beer there. So we got a guy to buy us Mad Dog 2020, an 19-year-old dude. And then we had to sneak it into the house. So what we did was, one of us stayed outside, and my buddy went up in his second floor bedroom and he had a rope that he tied to a football helmet. He played football, right? He lowered the football helmet, and we filled it with these bottles of Mad Dog, and he pulled it up in the bedroom. And dude, we got so shit hammered. And of course, our parents found out anyways, because we came down the next day stinking of booze and looking like death warmed over, right? And it was Mad Dog 2020. So awful stuff. Yes.
Yeah, well, the chat feels you here. They've got their own Mad Dog stories. It's a rite of passage, apparently.
It is. Definitely is, yeah. Mad Dog coconut? They made a coconut? What? Oh, that's awful. All right, so go ahead.
Okay, but yeah, for me, another great song on this record.
Yep.
So let me get back to my notes here. Neutron Bomber. Like, this is another one of those songs that for me falls like Heretic. It's great lyrically, but it does not, like, I'm not attracted to it emotionally and by any means in terms of like the musically. It's not grab me at all. After Neutron, which I guess there's an interesting history there, right? Like, when I was doing some reading a little bit about potentially Ronald Reagan, the story of Ronnie and sort of setting things on fire, but I also got notes that it has to do with a childhood friend. So I don't know if
I didn't dig deep into that one. No, I didn't know about that.
maybe the chat knows something about that one. Yep, Mephisto Waltz, the instrumentation, and then we get to Forever Free.
There it goes. There you go. Get ready, everybody.
If there was ever, I mean, one, I do not have any whatever dating memories to Forever Free, so I can't speak to it the same way Jeff can.
Okay.
This sounds to me like a Bon Jovi wannabe song.
And
And
okay.
I don't like a song that apparently it was inspired for by Leonard Skinner. I don't know if that's how much of that is true or not.
You know what? That's interesting you bring that up. I didn't know that, but boy, that's not a shocker though, because it's got a little bit of that Tuesday's Gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
And here's like the greatest for me, you know, if you compare this ballad to Sleeping in the Fire, that is like a point of contrast between these two records that is a clear like why one record speaks to me and why one doesn't.
Tesla, that's a good wait, that's a good one. Tesla. It's got a little bit of that vibe. Yeah. Yeah, I see where you're going with this. You are essentially saying, if I'm hearing you right, that the day Sleeping in the Fire is kind of a dark ballad. This is all sort of sunshine.
Yeah, you know, whatever. Yeah. This is like the ballad that's going to be your the
song at your wedding.
But I mean, like, also like your power ballad of the 1980s,
right?
Like everything that is cliche about, which is something that WASP never was, right? Or that I never wanted them to be, at least I'll say.
Right.
Is I don't want like a White Snake or a that kind of 1980s sound creeping in, and maybe they love it. Right? Like maybe this is like something that they got into and really wanted to write a song like this.
Well, I mean, maybe Blackie was going through something with somebody, or although I don't know that it's necessarily a love song. It's a ballad, but when you well, I don't know. Is it? Hang on a second. You know what? I don't have the lyrics for this one. This doesn't have
I don't. I to your point, like. I don't think it's about like a dedication, like a love ballad.
Yeah, I don't think it is.
But sonically, to me, I just want to. I shut down because it feels like that.
Wow!
Big hair, like everything that is, shirtless. It's singing to you, beautiful, like that kind of power ballad.
I'm wondering if it's their biggest song though. I think it might be.
I wouldn't be surprised. I surprised.
I think it might. You're right. It's got a little bit of a, a little bit of the Bon Jovi thing going on with all the stacked vocals and all the, the woo, ride in the wind forever, ride in the wind forever free.
Yes. And there's a moment in it,
and
right?
There's definitely Skinner. Now that you brought it up, I can't unhear that. Yeah.
There's a moment in it where it picks up the pace a little bit. There's a little bit of dynamic tension, but then it resigns itself again to something sort of easy, whatever, chill, low key power ballad. It's just not for me. It's not my jam at all.
Yeah, it's the Alone Again. It's the, I'm trying to think what ballad Rat had that was. I don't. Did Rat? Really
what's the off of what was the big single on Theater of Pain from Motley Crue? Like
Home Sweet Home.
Home Sweet Home. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Man, you're ruining this song for me now. You know that, right?
Well, you're the one who likes it, so you gotta.
I do. I do. I don't. Let me put it this way. Compared to Home Sweet Home, it's not even a contest. It's about which one I like. I fucking hate Home Sweet Home. Don't really like Motley Crue anymore, and I used to like them and saw them a couple times. But
right,
yeah, but I see where you're coming from. I don't have an argument for it. I really don't. Maybe it's just I was digging that chick pretty hard, and I think maybe that there's still some lingering memories from some of the experiences I had with her that probably keep me tied to it. You know what I mean? That's probably what it is.
For sure.
And
So we get into next here, Man
November
Eater.
Rain. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is like another one of those, like, I like metal. Being into metal is cool, right? It's like getting on your motorcycle and ride
Yep.
kind of deal.
Yep.
You don't need to be more complicated than that to like make it an enduring song. And I do enjoy like coming back to this kind of like just overall energy, right? Like it's a shift. We've moved from our power ballad. We can get back on our badass Harleys and ride around. And
Right. Yeah, right.
like, I like metal. Being into metal is cool, and it's just a great sort of ride and bike song. So
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. And
You know what, though, real quick, just let me
Go ahead.
interject one thing. What would have really been cool was instead of doing The Real Me, they should have done Maneater by Daryl Hall and John Oates. Could you imagine Wasp doing Maneater? That would have been a cool fucking song.
I mean, I just if they'd put it towards the end, you know, they'd flip the.
Yeah.
I don't mind covers. It's just weird, and it's not that the Who track doesn't, you know.
No, but the point I was getting at was, you know,
Right.
Oh, here she comes. She's a man eater.
Yeah,
Would have just been fucking hilarious to hear Blackie
Right.
singing those type of lyrics. You know what I mean? So go ahead. Last track.
Last track. Yes. Rebel in the FDG. It's a nice sort of bow to end this record. It matches Heretic, right? And I think in terms of the production doesn't necessarily work for me, and the songs don't grab me in the same way. They aren't as much chorus driven on this record for me. They're a bit more complex in their construction.
They're not 3.5 minutes. They're not
Right. It's not like verse chorus kind of thing, which you got in the first record.
Yeah.
So I think for being built for radio, this is a little bit less appealing, but
yeah. Except for the Bon Jovi power ballad.
Yes, thank you.
Because this was their most
free.
This was their most successful album as far as like, you know, sales and chart position wise. So.
Correct. I think it is their big.
And they probably, and I believe because then they broke up, they probably had the most amount of money they'd had as far as budgeting. You know what I mean? So they could kind of go a little bit more grandiose with Blackie could go more directions with his muse. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think the to kind of to wrap it up here, it shows progression. It shows a band that wants to be something beyond, I think, potentially what they want, where they got started.
And you don't know too. You also don't know how much management and the label were pushing. You know, that's always sort of something that's happening. And you brought up a really fair point that in 1989, we're right on the precipice of grunge kicking in. We're right on the precipice of fucking, you know, Nevermind and you know, Soundgarden and Alice and all the, which I love a lot of those bands, but they were about ready to fucking close the door on the hair metal thing. I mean, what you had instead where you had bands like, which are some of my favorite bands like Saigon Kick, bands like Warrior Soul, The Cult, things like that were getting more, they were getting heavy and dark. It wasn't about image. It definitely wasn't about putting makeup on.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing. So,
and this is the record, I think, that is clearly like turning of the page, right?
Yes.
You know, so if in a way that you could not pigeonhole WASP into whatever the bands that they sort of came up with,
right?
This is in some ways opened another door, and I think that's why you see the life of them extend through the years. Is
right, and they come back after this with arguably a lot of other people. If we pick 10 other people that knew this band, I bet we'd have at least 3, maybe 4 that would say, well, you guys are both wrong. The best, most definitive album is this one. And I wouldn't necessarily argue with them either. You know what I mean? But I saw Wade was saying that predominantly the set last year, I think it was when they were out, was made up of the debut album and of Idol songs.
Right.
So there you go. I mean, they don't have as much affinity for this album as I might have,
Right.
But I like now. If I was going to give this a grade, I'd give it like a 9.85 because of Forever Free, of course. But no, if I was going to score this, I'd probably give it a 9.25. That's where I'd go. There's enough slop in here. There's already a half point off for Fucking the Real Me, because while it's an okay cover, it's just not. I just don't see the point of having it on there, except it was a single and it was probably what helped drive the album with Forever Free. But yeah, I would rather not have that song on there. So that's already a half point off, and then the rest of it's just kind of like, production is probably a little too clean, just ever so slightly. That's probably why I would come down to a 9.25. So.
Yeah, the thing I just don't have, right, like to your point about, throwing down the windows, crank it up in your car, and just falling in love with the songs.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that the debut offers. They aren't nearly as complex. The instrumentation is, relatively, simple.
Right.
But the impact, the emotional, like I can listen to Love Machine, or I Want to Be Somebody, or Hellion, or like those songs for me, you could put them on repeat in a way that
yeah.
right, like they feel, timeless, and relative to their peers, I think are often beyond, right? Like they're a great example of something that can operate within a scene that feels incredibly dated, and then at the same time speak to people today, right? Like, and I think that's what WASP. One of the reasons most people sometimes hesitate to group them in with the glam scene is because they sounded heavier, darker. There's the show,
a little more menacing.
Yeah, those songs don't sound. I mean, as much as you can like listen to Cinderella, like that's a classic whatever glam record.
Mm-hmm.
This feels to me just as like enjoyable today, and in a way that I don't necessarily associate with a lot of the other bands. So there's too many like classic songs, and I think the last thing I kind of wanted to bring up here is, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts. I think with Headless Children and Crimson Idol, there's an attempt like to kind of rescue WASP from being grouped in with what potentially is like a marginalized and derogatory association with glam.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. I mean, I don't think once the debut came out, they moved on beyond that pretty quickly. And they became a band that was capable of touring with Metallica or Slayer, which you would not have seen Rat do that. You would have not seen Motley in the early years do that either, I don't think. They just, or a band like, or even, like Dokken for sure. Poison. Yeah, Poison. Oh my God, yeah. Could you ever see Poison and Wasp going out together?
Yeah. Because I love this debut because it feels like the Sunset Strip.
Yeah.
But it does not. I can see Super Strike here is in the comments. It's not like arguing against that sort of association because it does sound different, which I totally get that, right? It's like calling Venom a new wave of British heavy metal band, right? It'll give you a time and a place, but it doesn't accurately describe the sound.
Exactly. Yeah. Accurately.
Right. Yeah. And I think to your point though, the sex, the partying, all those things that I think historically rock critics, metal critics have said like this is a limiting factor to whether we should consider this band to be like part of a
Real.
greater, greater
Are
sort of like
they legit?
pantheon. Yeah,
Yeah, are they
they're not
legit?
legit. Like they have to write songs that are real or better or conscious in order to be
Mm-hmm.
considered relevant. And what I love about this record is he was never more culturally threatening on a record, and at the same time absolutely carefree about, he felt like he was writing a metal record for metal fans. And to some degree that he did not, his lyrical contributions grew and he showed a greater level of like intellectual curiosity that extended beyond that. But I love the fact that you listen to this record and he feels totally unencumbered by whatever rock critic or expectations or what metal fans are supposed to be. And I love the fact that like you could be a teenager, right? And as kind of cliche as a song like School Days is,
Yeah.
it also, if I'm 12 and I hear this, like that's kind of my world, right?
Yeah,
Like,
of course. Yeah. Mhm.
and I think it's true that he starts talking about neutron bomber or, greater sort of religious and political persuasion later in his career. Obviously he goes through like his own spiritual sort of awakening that he puts to
Right.
record.
Yep.
But here, I just think it's a great glimpse into like pop culture, 1980s heavy metal sort of consciousness.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, no
And
doubt.
it makes it feel eternal in that regard, that it's a metal record that is completely tied into what a young heavy metal fan always wanted. So
Yeah, and it's funny because, I mean, when you talk about the glam hair thing, see when I think of glam, I think of T-Rex, Tommy Bolin, New York Dolls. Like I go even further back, Hanoi Rocks towards the end of that, there
Sure.
like the end of the 70s. So I always tend to do the hair thing, which is always kind of thought of as a derogatory, thing. There were some good hair bands. I'm sorry, there were. Rat's a good hair band. They're, all 5 of their albums are really good, man. They just are. They're the first 3 are the best, but and then the last one, I think it was the 6th one, Detonation's really good. But and you had other bands from that era. I contend that Dokken had some really good songs. They certainly had probably one of the 2 best guitar players, of course. But and there was other bands in there. I mean, I'd have to really sit down and look at a list of them to pull some out. But the thing about WASP, and I'm glad you let it off with talking about like the fact that they were different from the rest of those bands. But it's almost impossible to say exactly how or why. They just had a different sort of a thing happening around them. And it might have been the hype of Fuck Like a Beast and them going, hey, we're not gonna we'll put it out somewhere else. We don't care. We're not gonna play the big label. We're not gonna play the game with the label. We're gonna put it out. So we'll take it somewhere else. Somebody will want it. And they did, and that created such a buzz about them that they're still here, because a lot of those bands didn't make it out of that, or they split up, or they had a death in the thing, and basically it's always been a vehicle for Blackie to sort of do his thing. And so yeah, I this is fun. I grabbed the first 5. Do I really need to go beyond that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I really do need to. I know Alan likes WASP quite a bit too. I should check in with him and see. Do you have any of the more current WASP stuff or no?
no, I've kind of been curious to look into what was the I'm trying to find it. The
Golgotha?
KFD. Yeah.
What's it called?
KFD. I think it's like Kill Fuck Die, I think is what it stands for.
Does it? Yeah, I think you're right, actually. Yeah.
Because it was almost to me like him trying in the midst. It for me, that's my young, I'm at that point like pretty young. But I remember the controversy surrounding the likes of, Marilyn Manson, right?
Oh yeah.
So I was because that goes along with this is kind of be a little bit of a deep discussion here, but I grew up in Eugene, right? And in Thurston High School is when the shooting happened with Kip Kinkle. Anyway, so there was that visibility, that era, and Kill Fuck Die. Here we get Blackie commenting on what was going on in America at the time. It's a very like politically charged record, but it's also kind of like an industrial sound. But I just think his, to be where he was coming into that space, given this sort of shock rock thing, I think I'm interested to listen to that record just to try and go back to what was going on in my life at the end of the 90s, and have someone there who has got something to say.
The one I've read fairly good stuff about. Let me find the names of them here. So that's 97.
Right.
Kill Fuck Die, yeah. The one I think I heard that the Neon God are pretty decent. And Hell Dorado's pretty good. But I've never really like taken the time to just throw them on and like listen to them on Spotify to see, or not Spotify, but YouTube or whatever, to see if I'm like a fan. And I don't know why that is. Just for some reason, I just haven't.
Right.
I need to. I feel like I'm not really doing due diligence on the band if I don't check out some of this later material. But does that mean I'm going to buy it? I don't know. Hard to say. If I really enjoy it, yeah.
But at that point, you're kind of like, I'm tuning in to hear what's on Blackie's mind, right?
Right.
I think that's what the band's kind of turned into, which is not necessarily a bad thing in terms of a major voice within the heavy metal community. He's someone who probably has something articulate to say. So
yeah. Now the one thing I will bring up though, and Wade, you said you went to see him. There's a fair amount of. There were a couple of faux pas live where it pretty seemed evident that they were using backing tracks for all the vocal stuff. And I don't know if, like everybody has a different view of that. Some people are like, yeah, I want it to sound mostly like the album. Other people are like, yeah, like if you're Eddie Trunk, you hate backing tracks. When it comes to the vocal stuff, I tend to want to be a purist. I want to hear, even like, like we see a lot of these guys that can't cut it anymore, right? Like even one of my faves of all time, Geddy Lee, can't really sound like he used to in the 70s and 80s and 90s. It's his Father Time's undefeated, and I think Blackie's facing some of that to a degree. So do I really want to hear him up there sound like Bon Jovi? No, not really. Do I want to hear him sound like fucking Don Dokken now? No, not really. Not really. But I also don't want to I don't want to go pay for a show and have 90% of it be on a computer playback. Well, what was the point then? Well, I just got to watch him act it out up there. So I don't know what the deal is. I mean, Wade, you saw him. What did you think of the potential backing track thing? Was it pretty obvious to you? Because it sort of seemed like it to me when I've listened to live clips that they got a lot of stacked vocals going on, then two guys can't do that. You said you have not seen them, right?
No, I have not.
Is that a band you would go see if it was opportunistic?
Sure. I'd be curious to see that. Yeah. But I don't know. I can't speak to the backing vocals.
Yeah. I know Brian was in here earlier. He might have split already, but I thought he went to see that because it was a good bill, man. I mean, WASP and Armored Saint on the same bill is a pretty good bill. I'm down for that. I just didn't want to go back then. I was planning to go this time, but I think they canceled it. So look, in the end, I tend to agree that from an iconic standpoint, that maybe the debut is the one that you could say is definitive. They're still playing lots and lots of it live, which I think may be a function of those songs are easier to pull off live with a 4-piece than something off of the Idol or something where you do have to play backing tracks. You are synced. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah, and I mean, for me, if to go to your point, if the question is which album do you start with,
Right.
this is the one I point you towards. I'm not going to say it's your favorite, and I think we've seen the comments tonight. There are plenty of people who like
Headless Children
Headless or
or
Crimson,
Idol.
yeah, more. But to talk about this band without mentioning the debut and its historical impact and cultural influence, I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's what sets it apart for me, is making it definitive. So,
And I mean, this is a very good album too, man. There's a lot of great songs on this. Ball Crusher, The Last Command, Widowmaker's Killer, Jack Action, Cries in the Night. There's a couple goofy ones though too, like Blind in Texas. I like it, but kind of cheesy. And then you got Sex Drive, the song Sex Drive. Baki was not fearful at all of laying a lot of shit out there that was like, and now he's like born again. So I mean, does he even have sex? I don't know. Not that I want to know personally, but I mean, when you're born again, can you have sex anymore, or does that go against God's desires for you? I don't know. Weird. I people that know this channel know me. They know that I'm not a Bible guy. I'm not a religious guy. I'm not saying you can't believe or someone watching can't believe. That's totally cool with me. I just can't go there. So I mean, like the sex stuff, I don't really give a shit about. I'll never forget. Funny quick story here that ties it. It doesn't tie in with anything. Never mind. I probably shouldn't say it, but my experience with religion is not the greatest. So when I've tried to be around people that are religious, I kind of feel like Blackie Lawless. What like Blackie used to be, not who he is now, apparently. But it's like, it's funny. You see guys like Mustaine, Mustaine was like shooting heroin and snorting coke and, talking about killing people because that's his business. And now he's fucking Joe Godboy, all the time. It's like, come on, man. Like, really? Like, are you serious? Anyway. Well, look, man, I appreciate you being here. I think I think we've now logged the longest dad, you and I.
oh really?
Yeah, this one jumped into the 2-hour range. Generally, we've kept them in the hour and a half to hour and 45. I'm trying to remember who the other long one was with. Marty and I went pretty long too on Maiden. But this one had a lot of cool things that we could reference because you were born when, Kellen? Do you mind me asking?
84.
Okay, so you were born the year this came out. And so you don't really know what it was like to live in the mid 80s because you didn't really start being cognizant of the world until you were probably close to probably 1990 or 89 or something like that. When you
Right.
were 4
I mean,
or
like
5.
Kill Fuck Die, I'm 13 years old. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the 80s were, just as the 60s were a turning point for this country from the cultural revolution standpoint, from free love and women's rights, and obviously the big one, civil rights, which you could then caveat. We don't want to get political here, but you could still say 50 years later we've come so far, but we're not very far away from the issues always of race and religion and sex and
sure.
sexuality. But the 80s were a pretty cool fucking time to be alive because as a teen, almost, I graduated high school in June of 84 and I was 18. And, all kind of very interesting things were happening in my life at that point in time, right? First sexual experiences, first partying, not the first partying experiences, but real partying, going off to college, and living with my buddies and, a decadent house of drinking. That's all we fucking did, and you working and all those kind of things. And all around you see these things like just bringing up the PMRC was so like not triggering, but like, wow, that trigger. It was triggering in that it made me think about things that were going on back then that I haven't thought about in a long time. And this was what this Twisted Sister was it? Who was the You'll know this more than I will. Who was the Florida rap band that really went way over?
A 2 Live Crew.
2 Live Crew. Holy hell. That, and there you go. That's another thing. The hip hop stuff was happening. And
Sure.
and it was like just a very culturally explosive sort of time. And I will say that, I'll never forget like hearing that word fuck in a song was like, yeah, we've arrived. It's like we're there finally. Somebody said, yeah, we're just gonna do this.
Right.
Stop us, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I to your point though, like the band was so well positioned to be as controversial as they are, but also insightful, right? I think
Right.
that's unique that you have both, right? Someone who's willing to obviously push boundaries in a way that they know it's going to be offensive, but also be able, like, they didn't participate in the PMRC hearings.
No, they didn't. You're right.
And
Yet they were one of the most egregious characters. And I mean, but in all honesty, though, you had Frank Zappa doing that all the way back into the 60s.
God,
Frank was the guy. He
Right.
was the counterculture guy that was like, was doing that stuff live. And so a lot of kudos go out to him. Brilliant man.
There's so much. So for me going into this episode, I spent a lot of time going back and looking at the hearings and watching just sort of the flashback into how people approached, controversial rock music and what
Yeah.
it just feels so distant, right? Versus some 40 years ago.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, the funny part is, like, I remember seeing that stuff live on the news, Kellen. Okay, in the '85
Right,
when they had those hearings, and there's D. Snyder walking in with his fucking mane of hair, and just ripped arms, and he's almost bare chested, right? It's like goes in there like just like, fuck you, man, fuck you, you ain't gonna tell me what to do. And they expected some doofus behind the mic, and when that's not D. Snyder, man. That guy's very, very smart, very, very, very sharp. And then you get Frank Zappa, who was smarter than probably 9 million people on this planet. When you really get down to it, Frank Zappa might have been probably the most, for me, I think he's probably the most probably the deepest thinker in all of rock music.
He definitely took up the mantle, right?
Mhm.
Like he all the footage in terms of debating or trying to shed some sort of perspective as to what an artist goes through, but also the responsibility of the government and how record labels play a role in it. It's just really interesting to think about it back then, and then you listen to this record and you're like, oh, I can only imagine what it would have been like. So,
Tim says, WASP, not extreme enough for Kellen. But he does not. Let's just be clear. He does not like Forever Free. There is no doubt about that. He's going to turn that song off if that comes on every time. 99% of the time, he's turning that thing off. But yeah, Kellen, man, I can't thank you enough for being here. Can't thank everybody that popped in enough for stopping by. Kellen, what's going on over on your channel? Anything major coming up that you've got going on?
End of year stuff. I don't know.
You're going to be on with Marty, I guess, right?
Well, I got an invitation to see my family out. My sister who lives in Maryland, so I may not be there for their end of year.
Where's she live in Maryland? Where's she live in Maryland?
Just outside of Baltimore. She's a nurse in Baltimore. So,
dude,
yeah,
you're gonna be up this way when?
It'd be the end of the month. So,
well, you gotta let me know, man, because I'm only an hour away.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're going to be around and you've got 2 hours to kill and you want to go to a cool record shop, I got the place.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'll give you my.
Maybe I can meet you down there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
So I'll in the days leading up, but I think in the time that they're going to do their end of year thing, I will be away. So
Oh, you're going to be away. Okay. Yeah.
I may not be able to participate in that, but
You got to do something on yours though.
Yeah, I'll probably do
something.
Yeah. I mean, I don't do like the collection update videos, so the end of year stream is like my one opportunity to talk about my records. Yeah.
Yeah, all the stuff you picked up. Yeah. That'd be a fun one. You got any like special things you're working on at all? By the way, am I wrong in this, or did I see that there's something coming up with BAN again?
I am not. If that would not be, he works in trilogies, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if there's another record.
I could have swore I read something somewhere that there was something going on there. I'll dig around, and if I find it, I'll let you know. But
for anyone, I would just say for the one thing I did put out recently this past week was with Alan talking about the new Sirith Ungol record. So Alan and I sat down and talked about Dark Parade. For anyone who's a Sirith Ungol fan, I mean, we did a pretty comprehensive dive on that record, so you can check that out.
Yeah, I got to get Alan on here. We're gonna do Deep Purple. I forget what record he chose. In Rock, I think, and I think I chose Burn. So we're gonna get Alan on to do one of these. Speaking of these, Tuesday night, I'm back. I'm not going to be drinking the day before. I guarantee you that. I made it through tonight, but I will tell you, when we are done, I'm going to go take a shower, and I'm literally going to collapse into some sort of catatonic state and go to sleep, hopefully. But Tuesday night, Jimmy from Future Ruins, we all know and love Jimmy. Jimmy's coming on. We are going to do a special dad. We're going to do a twofer. We're actually going to do 4 albums. We're going to do Devin Townsend. And the reason we're doing 4 albums is because, I don't know, Devin Townsend has like 8,000 albums out, number one. I'm just joking, but he's got a lot of albums out. And 2, we kind of wanted to separate what we're calling, it's not but the excuse me, the period that he was doing both solo albums and he was doing Strapping Young Lad. We chose an album from that era, and then the post-Strapping era, we chose an album. And so I believe Jimmy's doing Ziltoid for his post, and I'm doing Epicloud, and only because I honestly have not checked out Empath or Light Work or whatever, the new ones. I gotta say, I kind of reached the saturation point with Devin. I love Devin, but I just had to step back away from it for a while. It was almost too much. But then the or during, the strapping stuff, I picked Ocean Machine, Biomech, killer album, and Jimmy picked Teria. So that's going to be Tuesday night. And then I'm going to tease this again. In January, UFO, deep dive with Craig Beerhorst, and very likely Craig Locicero, I believe, and potentially Patrick from Vinyl Archivist. I think we're going to do that. And then also look for on the 29th or 30th. I don't have the date locked in yet. I'm going to be bringing back someone that was very popular on the show a couple weeks ago. And he and I are going to talk about a very unusual and unique Norwegian band. Now there's a couple bands you could go with there. So that's all I'm going to say. But this band has one of the more eclectic and unique discographies out there. But I'm going to be doing that with a celebrity guest, one of my musician pals that I've had on. And also, speaking of, Wednesday at 4 p.m. Wednesday, 4 p.m. I am going to be interviewing. Oh, wait. Oh, shit. Uh-oh.
Schedule conflict.
I just realized I have a schedule conflict. Yeah. Hang on to your hats. It's not going to be Wednesday. I'm going to D.C. on Wednesday to see I'm going down to see oh Jesus Christ, William Basinski, which most people are not going to know who the fuck that is, but the guy that did the disintegration loops, look him up. Very cool ambient drone minimalist tape manipulation stuff. Been wanting to see this guy for a number of years. He doesn't do a lot of touring. When he does, he only plays big cities, and he's playing DC. And I was like, fuck it, I'm going. So I was supposed to interview Jean Levin from Dokken, full interview, not the short one. That was going to be on Wednesday, but I'm going to have to see if we can do that on Thursday instead. So look for that. I think that's kind of it for now. We've got the holidays coming up, and everybody's going to be doing stuff with their families, I'm sure. My kids are coming home. I get to hang with my daughter, who's actually moving to Nashville, from Asheville to Nashville this weekend coming up. And my other daughter, Lauren, is helping her out. And then we're going to hang out Christmas. So, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Anything else you want to add, man?
No, this Wednesday on Album Club, we will be talking about, let me go grab it. Hold on.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it, man. Yeah, I haven't checked out Empath yet, Nate. I got to check out the last couple of albums. I just was kind of overwhelmed with too much stuff. And yeah, I agree. Frank was a fucking genius for sure. Absolutamente.
Today is the day in the eyes of God. Do you know this at all?
I do not know that. And I know that two of the guys in Mastodon were in that band, right?
This is the record that includes Braun and Bill.
Oh, Braun and Bill were in that one. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think Troy and what's his name?
Brent
were in a different band, right? Is that Feed Without a Face or something?
Yeah, there's like this period where Braun and Bill moved down from Rochester, and on their way down before they get to Atlanta and form Mastodon, they're in a bunch of different bands. So,
okay, this is one. And what is it like? You had to explain it quick.
So it's a great question. This band's somewhere between grind, noise, metalcore. Is probably how I would describe it. Yes, incredibly abrasive. So if you're thinking like what most people associate with metalcore, it's before that. This is a little bit more of a noisy kind of grindcore presentation, but the riffs are a bit more punk.
Full of hell, kind of, or no?
But that's even like, this is raw.
Wow, really?
It's a very, very challenging. Like
I'm gonna be interested to see if TJ and Marty like this album. Marty, I think, said he did, right?
Yeah, Marty likes it. I'm fairly sure he likes it a lot, actually. I don't know how TJ maybe have tried to get into it, and I think Jim is not a fan. It's too punk for him.
Yeah.
But man, the vocal performance is nasty. It's a very, very abrasive listen. Probably has more in common with something like, I don't know if you know who Melt Banana is at all.
Yeah, I know the name. Yeah. Who's the vocalist on it?
I forget. Let me get his name here all correct for you. But it's really the vocalist. It's his band.
I'll check it out. I'll check it and see what Braun's drumming, I'm sure, is fucking sick. I mean,
yeah, no, the drumming on it is otherworldly, but I think that's kind of
Steve Austin.
Yeah, there you go. Steve Austin. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. Like, I will tell you that when I got the first Mastodon, like Remission, I was like, what the fuck is this? But the drumming was just so insane. I was like, what? And now I love that album, but I did not like it when I first heard it. I was not really ready because that was 2001, 2002? I think, right around that.
This record or the first Mastodon?
No, the first Mastodon.
So the first Mastodon, Remission, comes out in 2002.
Okay. And what's that? That's got to be before
this. This is 98.
Okay, 98. Yeah.
98, 99.
And I just remember listening to Remission and going, these vocals are rough, man. Because I was struggling, man. I was not a, I've told that tale many, many times. It
Sure,
took
sure.
Opeth to get me over
Yeah.
the
Of a
threshold
hump.
of death
Yeah.
metal. Yeah, it just took that, over the hump. But what now? I love that album. But I mean that. But I do remember, man, listening to that album, going, this drummer must have like 15 arms. Like, how the fuck is he doing all that stuff? Like, it's just insane, right?
And I think the question will be, I think, focused. We kind of have like a
Yeah.
General sort of like topic that goes past our sort of formula.
Right.
Will be about the role of metal drumming, and so I'll kind of get into that later on Wednesday. But for anyone who's a fan of Braun's work, that is a record to check out.
I'm actually gonna listen to it when I get off. Just
okay. Well, I would say for someone who's dealing with a hangover, it might not be your.
I probably won't listen to the whole thing. But what I was gonna get at is, knowing me, you probably think I'm probably not gonna like this, right?
I'm gonna say it may be a little bit rough for you because you also you're not the biggest grindcore fan either.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. And I've tried, man. I have tried. I've come around a little bit on Napalm, the more melodic Napalm stuff like Harmony Corruption. I mean, but I do struggle with grind. Yeah, I don't know what it is, and I'm not a big punk guy either. So
so this is
two
like
big stripes.
This is like you take all of the death metal out of grindcore and introduce more noise.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, if you just got done dealing with a migraine all day long, this might not be the record for you to try.
I'm coming around. I'm feeling a little bit better. But I wanted to ask you before we roll. Do you know King Gizzard? Are you into King Gizzard?
Yeah, I know them. Yeah.
Do you have any of their albums or no?
I don't own anything by them. The last record that caught my eye, what I want to say, was in 2020.
I picked I gave it a. Hold on. So I am buying vinyl now because I do have a vinyl.
I saw that you got back on your collector's kick. Yeah.
Yep. And so I picked up this one. It's called Petro Dragonic Apocalypse.
Oh yes.
And I gotta say, dude, this artwork is fucking killer. It's embossed. The monster's embossed. It's
so like the scales have like a textural feeling.
Oh yeah, all this is all bulging out. It's fucking amazing artwork, man. I grabbed it and it's a double. I think it's just black vinyl. I'm pretty sure. I don't think I got any special. Yeah, it's black. This is kind of one of their two sort of, I would say, sort of metal albums where they kind of go more in like a Void Bodian sort of vein. But I also picked up 4 or 5 other CDs. And here's the weird thing, though. They sent me, it's a long story, but Amazon fucked up my order. And they sent me like 3 copies of one and 2 copies of another. So if you want me to send you the extras, I can send you the extra CDs if you want.
I mean, well, if I catch you in Baltimore, you can.
I'll just give them to you. Yeah, I just give them to you there. Yeah, they're interesting. They're an interesting band.
All over the place.
Oh man, dude! Like one album's a stoner album, one album's a fucking hippie psych album, one's a drum circle album. I mean, they put out. I don't know how many albums they have out, like 37 or something crazy like that.
It's a pretty wild project.
I grabbed all the top ones, like the ones that on Rate Your Music were like the highest rated. I think I grabbed 5, one album and 4 CDs, and I'm working my way through them. And so, but I wondered whether you were into them, whether you might be interested in those. And then I also got a box set of what's that? Oh, there it is. This is spoken for. I'm going to give it to Rick, but you know Alan Parsons?
Yeah.
So I ordered the box set of this album.
Box set king.
Box set king, the king of box sets. You know it. And here, the the driver for Amazon delivered my shit to some other house 3 days in a row. So I finally called him and kind of wigged out on him. I'm like, hey, you got some dude that's either fucking stupid and can't read a map, or he's just stupid. You know, I don't know what the deal is, or he's high or something, because he's taking pictures and sending me emails that he's delivering shit to my house and it's not there. Well, anyways, so this was one of the things in some of the that stuff, and they put another order in for one, and then late that night it showed up at midnight, and so they sent me another one the next day, and I called him and I'm like, hey, you guys, your driver finally showed up at midnight, but he said he was here at 12 in the afternoon. I don't know what schedule he's on, but that's not how my clock works. But anyways, in the interim, you guys sent me replacements, and well, they're here. So I'll send them back if you tell me what to do with them. And the guy, he disappears for a little while. This is the Amazon help guy, right? He disappears for a little while and comes back on. He goes, just keep it. It's Christmas time. It's just keep it. I'm like, what? This is an $80 box set. I'm like, really? Okay. So I was going to throw it up and I was going to actually fucking sell it on eBay. But then I was talking to Rick. I'm like, do you want this, man? He's like, yeah, I'll take it. So I'm going to get that to him, and I'll get you the King Gizzard stuff. So hit me up when you know you're coming up, and when if you know, I know you're going to have family and stuff. So, but if you can get out for 2 hours in a day, we'll go out and have lunch, and bring your lovely wife along if she wants to come along, and we can go to Soundgarden. That's the name of the store.
Okay.
And I think you'll like it. I think you'll like it. Man. Yeah. So, all right, man. Thanks a million, and I appreciate it. Love you, buddy. And hang on one sec, guys. Thanks for being here tonight, and I'm going to end the stream now. All right, brother.